Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. God has kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, and now there's going to be a little scuffle between their two children. So let's look at that today. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. And so here we go. Firstborn. So remember the Cain and Abel story. Always remember who the firstborn was. It was Cain. And so all of the blessings that would come from being the firstborn, all of the benefits from being the firstborn, and all the responsibility that would come from being the firstborn would fall to Cain, not Abel. Oftentimes, because of how the story goes, we oftentimes do not think in our head that Cain was the firstborn. He's supposed to be the leader. We always think of Abel as being the leader, the one that God respected. Of course, we'll see that in a second. But oftentimes, at least in my mind anyway, we put that Abel was the firstborn. Cain was the firstborn with all the responsibilities and blessings that come from that. And then this is what Adam and Eve say. They say, have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Okay, so this promise that God made that the offspring of Eve would crush the head of the serpent, that Satan would be defeated through one of her children. Okay, here's some hope. We've got a man now. Maybe Cain, maybe he's the one that's going to crush the head of the serpent. Of course, we know that's not the case. Jesus would be the offspring from Eve, would be the child of Eve that would ultimately destroy Satan. But they're like, hey, we got a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother, Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. So Cain was a farmer, Abel was a shepherd. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. Now, I have that as a sin to confess. And not because Cain was a farmer and brought produce to the Lord, but notice the descriptor here. There is no descriptor. He brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. He just brought whatever he could find. He didn't bring the best to the Lord. He just haphazardly brought an offering to the Lord. And I think it would be wise when we're worshiping the Lord, when we're serving the Lord, when we're thanking the Lord, to not just do it in a haphazard format, but to be thankful, to give the Lord our best, to give the Lord to give to the Lord in a cognizant way of just showing honor to the Lord. And so we see that Cain just brings an offering to the Lord. But then notice how that's contrasted with Abel. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat. Notice the adjective there. It's the firstborn, by implication, the best. This is the best of his flock. Cain just brought something. Hopefully it wasn't rotting, but he just brought something. But Abel made sure he got the first and he got the best, firstborn of the flock and of their fat. So he brought the best to the Lord. And that is the example that we need to follow. We need to give the Lord our best when we serve him. When we come to church, we need to pay attention to him. Whenever you spend time with the Lord, your devotions, your quiet time, you need to give him the best. That is a good example for us to follow. That's what Abel did. And of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, I believe, not because it was an animal, but because it was the best. Now, some folks will say, well, we know that God offered the very first sacrifice. So we know the very first sacrifice was an animal because God had to kill an animal in order to clothe the nakedness of Adam and Eve. And so therefore, Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel should know that the proper way to approach God is through an offering, a sin offering, a sacrifice of an animal, and that Abel did that. Now, I think you could get that, but it appears with the way the text is reading that we should be looking more at that Abel, the reason God had regard for Abel and his offering is because Abel had regard for what he brought. He tried to bring the best, whereas Cain was just bringing whatever he found. So the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. God respected what Abel brought. He did not respect what Cain brought. And here's where sin just kind of piles up on itself. It just kind of whirls around and just goes down the drain. It says, so Cain was very angry and his face fell. He pouted. He did not give the Lord what was expected of him. He did not do well. And he's walking around all gloomy and saying, woe is me. Now, God is going to have some words for him and even gives him some counsel and direction. But we have to be careful that we ourselves don't fall into the same condemnation as Cain. Listen, you and I, what do we do all the time? We sin and we fall short of the things that we're supposed to do. We fall short of the duties that are expected of us by our employers, by our coworkers, by our friends, by our families. We fall short in so many places. And here's what can happen. When we fall short of the duties that God requires of us, our family requires of us, that our society requires of us, when we fall short of that, we oftentimes can get angry because we expect that we should be able to fulfill those circumstances, or we feel like the standard is just too high. It's unreasonable of what the Lord is expecting of us. It's unreasonable what our friends and families are expecting of us. We get angry, and then we kind of go into this pouting type of situation. We get real grumpy, and a lot of internal things go on in our mind. And so we have to be careful that we don't do that when we fall short. And you're going to fall short many times. You're going to sin and you're going to fail in your duties, rather than walking around angry and bitter and upset, letting your face fall droopy and be irritated. You know people. I hope you're not one, but you probably are sometimes, just like I am. You just carry it in your face. You're irritated that you're not getting it done. You're not getting it accomplished. You're not fulfilling the duties that you're supposed to be doing. The best thing for us to do is to confess our sins, right? Say, yes, that's wrong. I should have done it. I'm supposed to do it. You feel bad about it because you realize you should have done it. You ask the Lord then to forgive you. You ask the person that you sinned against to forgive you, and you don't let your face fall. I pray that has been a blessing to you all, and I'll see you in the next video. I guess you're still here.